Welcome to Talk Travel with Heather Tate, North Mississippi's podcast for savvy travelers. Talk Travel with Heather Tate is a weekly podcast that airs every Monday on the Shark 102.3 FM radio station based in Ripley, Mississippi, and is then released as a podcast. Travel advisor and travel enthusiast Heather Tate of Whimsical Destinations gives listeners expert travel tips curated through the years of personal and professional experience. By clicking subscribe, you'll have a new travel tip to add to your collection delivered to your podcast library every Monday. Talk Travel with Heather Tate is brought to you by Sun Bear Studio. Sun Bear Studio is a boutique recording studio in the heart of Ripley, Mississippi. When you record with us at Sun Bear Studio, we can mix, master, register, and publish your music, your podcast, or your family story. Email us when you're ready at sunbear@jc.media.
This program was recorded at Sun Bear Studio in Ripley, Mississippi.
Good morning, Northeast Mississippi travelers. This is Heather with Talk Travel with Heather Tate, and I am so excited to share my adventures and tried and true tips with you. Whether you are also a seasoned traveler, a hopeful traveler, or currently an armchair traveler, meaning you're going to follow along with us from home for now. And speaking of home, this is our 119th episode of Talk Travel with Heather Tate, and we're talking about bringing the trip back home with you. So today I want to talk about ways that our travels can impact our daily lives once we return back home. Ralph Crawshaw says, travel has a way of stretching the mind. The stretch comes not from travel's immediate rewards, the inevitable myriad of new sights, smells, and sounds, but with experiencing firsthand how others do differently what we believed to be the right and only way. I love this quote. We've talked a lot over the past months and years about how travel really broadens your mind, your worldview, your possibilities, your opportunities. But it can also broaden and enrich your home. So I'm going to share some personal ways that I feel like traveling, going to different destinations has impacted my own home in Guntown, Mississippi. And I would love for you to share ways that travel has impacted your home. Please share those on our Facebook group, Heather and Logan Tate Whimsical Destinations. So first off, some personal changes. I love hammocks when we travel. When we go to the Caribbean, one of my favorite things to do is to just lay in one, listen to the ocean crashing against the shore, and reading a book, or sometimes even closing my eyes for a moment. Even though you can ask my husband, Logan, I do not, as a rule, believe in taking naps. I just don't. Maybe that'll change one day. But I've never liked taking naps. I just can't do it. He, on the other hand, does not line up with that train of thought and would love a nap in the afternoon, especially when we're traveling. So if we're laying in a hammock, he's going to be asleep within minutes. And if I have a book, or if I have my phone, so I'm taking pictures, or if I'm just trying to let myself just relax for a moment and not do anything, which is the hardest thing for me, then I want to do that in a hammock. And it took years for me to just have that moment where I realized I love hammocks when I travel. It's something I look forward to the most. But we don't have a hammock where we live. We have a pond. We have woods where, we have so many places here that with trees that would be great for a hammock. And I grew up never having a hammock in our yard. And so it wasn't until one day that I was in the Caribbean in a hammock where I thought, I need one of these back home. So it sounds silly, but it was really being somewhere else, being in another country, that made me realize, like, the things that I love about traveling in other places, that doesn't mean that the only time I can experience them will be when I'm traveling. Some of these things I can easily incorporate and bring back home. So now we have hammocks everywhere. Logan will say that I have a hammock buying obsession. If I see a beautiful hammock on sale, I'm going to order it on Amazon. I'm going to pick it up at Ollie's for $9.99, and I'm going to hang up the hammock everywhere. So now we have, I think, 3 hammocks around our yard. So that is one way. Another thing, speaking of our yard, is I love an English-style garden. And over the years, almost without even realizing it, my personal style is leaning towards an English-style garden. And our front yard, slowly but surely, and if you follow me on Facebook, you know that I have a love-hate relationship with my front yard, and I have been battling grass, or the lack of grass, growing in our yard for years. I would say since having children. Some would say that there's no connection, but I will say My grandmother used to have a lot of grass in our front yard, and there was never even an issue of, will we have grass this year? Will we not? We just had grass. Even with all the trees, grass was not an issue. You have 2 boys, and all of a sudden, and I also have dogs running in and out of my front yard. All of a sudden, I can't keep grass growing. Well, I love the style of an English garden, and that is what my yard is turning into. So if you were to pull up in our driveway, you're most likely going to see me on the front porch in one of my swings or in the front yard in a butterfly chair, enjoying it. Because when we would travel to bed and breakfast, not even in England, but we're talking like throughout Mississippi, like Natchez especially. Like, I love a welcoming garden that feels like an extension of your home, where you can go and you can sit and you can have a cup of coffee or a cup of hot tea, which is another thing that has been inspired by my travels. And so our yard is taking on an English cottage-style garden feel. So speaking of hot tea, since I mentioned it, we went to England, as you know, if you've listened to recent podcast episodes, we went to England in August. And my husband and I used to really enjoy drinking coffee in the late afternoons and even evenings. Now we have switched to almost exclusively drinking hot tea. If it's in the afternoon or if it's before dinner, we're drinking hot tea, not coffee. And I will say this has been a huge impact in us for the past 2 months. That's what we've been doing. So habits of what we eat, habits of what we drink, how we like to eat. We eat later in the evening. And I will say this could be inspired by my European travels. They tend to eat later in the evenings. It is not unusual in a lot of countries, Spain, Portugal, even Italy, to eat later in the evenings, around 8 or even 9 o'clock at night. We tend to, in America, unless you're maybe in a big city, we don't normally eat later. We eat a little bit earlier. But I will say our schedule for dining has tended to be a little bit later in the evenings. And I would say it's not just because I'm procrastinating making dinner. Maybe it is. But I'll say that's my European influence from our travels. Also, when it comes to dining, I love to eat al fresco. I love eating outdoors. This is something that will drive my boys crazy. Logan, London, and Christian would prefer to eat inside, I would say 7 out of 10 times. But I will eat outside 9 out of 10 times. Logan's window that he enjoys eating outside may be 10 to 15 degree window. Mine is much larger than that. If it's too cold, I can sit by a heater or bundle up. If it's too hot, I can have a fan on. If the mosquitoes are buzzing, I can have a candle and I'll be okay. So I love dining outside. I think everything tastes better that way. And I know this comes from travels, not only when we're in the Caribbean, when I almost exclusively will eat outside, especially for breakfast. I will be dining outside for breakfast and usually lunch. And if I can talk Logan into it, dinner as well. But when we're in Europe, that is very common. The cafe lifestyle in France specifically is you're going to be sitting outside with your coffee and your croissant. You're not eating inside most of the time. You're outside. You're people watching. You're enjoying, the weather. And I know we live in the South. And some would say in the summer it's just too hot. That may be why we'll eat later in the evening when it's cooled down some. Or I'll at least have my breakfast on the porch under a fan. And so I don't care that I live in the South and it's not always temperature-wise convenient to eat outside. I love to eat outside. So what ways would my boys be impacted? Those are some of the ways that I have personally changed things at home based on our travels. For Logan, he is hugely impacted by music. He listens to music all the time. And I will say he has a huge range of genres that he listens to. London and Christian and I like to tease him about it, but he loves Scottish music. It's not unusual to hear him listening to bagpipes, or he'll listen to Australian music. He'll have Japanese music going on in the backgrounds. Like, he will have all different types of cultures playing. And I know a lot of that is inspired from our trips. And that's what he brings home with him. The type of music, if we're somewhere and he hears something and he loves when we're traveling, he's going to incorporate that back home in his playlist. London and Christian, they bring it out with their play, like what they enjoy doing. Now, I know London is older now, so he might be mortified that I said that. He's 12, but he is obsessed with Flight Tracker. So now our travels have impacted him in that he has an obsession with all things flight. It used to be when he was younger, he had toy planes and he had different airports set up throughout the house and throughout the yard that he would take his planes, that he was going to different airports. Now, online, it's going to be his flight tracker. Also, Christian was hugely impacted by, sometimes it's where you go within the U.S. Legoland made a huge impact on Christian. And even though he already enjoyed Legos, now he is obsessed with Legos. And I know that traveling there not once but twice made an impact on him and what he has brought home with him. So it can be what your hobbies are at home that you enjoy. It can be food. It can be music. So it can be the culture that you bring into your home that's been inspired by where you travel. It can be your wardrobe. I have a lot of pieces in my wardrobe that are London inspired or Italian inspired. It could be your decor. I have a lot of decor throughout the house that the colors may have been inspired by both Italy and England. I say those are two huge influences, those destinations, on my personal style. What ways have you brought a destination back home with you? I would love to hear more about this. That's all the time we have for this week. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, life is a great adventure, but it is also what you choose to make of it. We only get one. So take the trip, make those memories, enjoy the time with your friends and your family. You won't regret it.
This show is made possible by JC Media, LLC in Ripley, Mississippi. JC Media owns the Shark 102.3 Classic Rock FM radio station where the show is hosted, and Sun Bear Recording Studio where the interviews are recorded. We need your feedback and support. If you listen to the podcast on a player like iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Amazon Music, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review. We also have an email in which you can share your feedback. That email is theshark1023@gmail.com. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite app or stream episodes online at shark1023.com/podcasts. Today's episode was produced by Melinda Marsalis. It was edited by Rick Williams and engineered by Chris Marsalis. The podcast technician is Joyce Grady.